It's quite wonderful to be back here. Having been here in May, it's almost like coming back to family in some sense. There's something very warm about it. Just having shared all that time with people in May. And this time, I feel deeply grateful to be back here with Anam Thubten Rinpoche and to be able to teach with him again. We've taught a couple times together. I think when one teaches the Dharma, I notice that whatever's happening around me and whoever I meet become part of what I'm going to teach. So maybe a month ago, for example, Owsley came to see me, or to Crestone, and we spent some time talking, and just whatever conversations we had deeply influenced my mind. And then, last May being here has influenced, I'm sure what I'm going to say tonight. And every little thing, somehow it just keeps continuing to change as I approach this very moment, and I have no idea what's going to happen. And then meanwhile, we have someone with a very deep mind to teach with, and it presents this very incredible challenge. Because whatever he says during this weekend is going to influence, and I can't kind of grasp onto anything but need to just be very present, and I like that experience very much. So I very much appreciate this opportunity, like I said, and I wanted to. Most people have this. I wanted to say something about this before we start, because this is also one thing that has influenced me since I've come to Louisville yesterday when I arrived on the plane. Actually, Rinpoche and I discussed this. After we got off the plane and got into the car, our respective drivers handed us this flyer, and we both agree that it's the most beautiful flyer that we've ever seen. And we were very surprised to open it up and find the Heart Sutra in here. And not only did we find the Heart Sutra in English, but we found the Heart Sutra in Tibetan, which I felt very touched. And this is a very important text for us. I also think in terms of Rinpoche and myself, I wanted to meet Rinpoche because he was interested in emptiness, which is something that's very important to me. And the Heart Sutra has to do with this notion of emptiness. And so it's very appropriate that it's in here. So for many reasons, this touched me. One of the reasons is that this is traditional Dharma. And this is where our understanding is rooted. And it's very powerful. But I also look at this and I think, what must people think when they read this? This might not make very much sense. And I can say for myself that it's taken me many, many years of practice and study to even reach a superficial understanding of what this means. I always feel with this that it's so deep and so profound, and it's changed me so profoundly inside as a human being. And yet I always feel like I'm just scratching the surface. And I think with all the great traditions, we have these texts that are very powerful for us. And yet it's hard to talk about your own tradition and represent it in a way that other people understand in a nutshell. And this is kind of a nutshell teaching. This is a sutra, but it's a very small, condensed sutra. And so I think when we look at these things, we just have to have some kind of faith or trust in the beginning, that there's something here. And I think it may be in a more essential way, because we don't have time to really study this word for word. We could talk about what this might mean. Rinpoche and I were thinking that often when Rinpoche teaches, he recites this mantra that's in here, Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Bodhe Svaha, that we may be starting tomorrow during the when we begin the retreat, we'll start chanting this a little bit. But maybe tonight we can come to understand it just a little bit. So we're not just chanting something that we have absolutely no idea what it is. It's very foreign, it's in Sanskrit, and so on. But it's also wonderful just to have a little bit of trust and just give over to something too. But I just wanted to mention that because to me it's very interesting. We talk about interfaith. We're having interfaith gatherings here, and what does that mean? It doesn't mean we're trying to put all the spiritual traditions in one pot and say they're the same exactly. That there's some sort of uniqueness to each one. Maybe we're here to represent the one that works for us. And it's not a matter of rightness or that there's some absolute truth to the words or the images, but it's a skillful means, it's a powerful means to come to an understanding of something that actually is unconditional and not Buddhist or Hindu or Christian or any Sufi, that it's something that we might experience by virtue of being human beings. So I like that we have both of those things, that I felt it was such a respect to the tradition, and I appreciate this so much because this is very valuable. This is a very valuable teaching. And I also appreciate that the Tibetan is in there. So whoever did this, I have a suspicion. I know who did this, but as somebody walking into this situation who's so in love with this particular tradition, it was very nice. It was very heartening, and it's kind of inspired me somehow deeply. And Rinpoche was saying the same, that he was just so amazed to open this up and see this. And I want to say something about the picture on the back. Owsley Brown asked me to tell the story of this painting. This is a painting of a Tibetan wisdom being called Prajna Paramita, who has a lot to do with the embodiment of emptiness. So it's perfect that she's here, and then there's this Heart Sutra here, which is about emptiness. And I've had a strong connection to this image, or this, you can say deity, I guess we can say a wisdom being, embodiment of emptiness or wisdom for many, many years. And I've always felt inspired to commission a tanka, which is a painting such as this one. And so I had that in my mind for quite a long time. And then one day, Anam Thubten Rinpoche came to Crestone for the first time, and that's when I met him initially. And I was so inspired having talked to him, and we talked a lot about emptiness, that I had a very strong sense of conviction that I wanted to commission this painting. And I did, and so this is the painting here. So I'd like to pass this around because it has this tremendous meaning for me, and I just think it's beneficial for people perhaps to see it. And maybe I'll get into tonight trying to at least touch on what this image means and what the mantra means and what the Heart Sutra might mean, but not in a scholarly way, since we don't have time, and not in a way that really goes in and explains exactly what it means word for word. But I think in a way that maybe we all, maybe even already understand. So I thought to begin tonight, last time when I was here, in the middle of a teaching, when we started to have a discussion, the question and responding time, somebody asked me a question that haunted me. I wonder if this woman is here. I'm curious. But she asked me, after I'd given my talk, and of course many people from different faiths were there and talking about their spiritual traditions, she asked me, in Buddhism, she asked, there's no deity outside. The notion of divinity that we have, say, in Christianity, believes that there's a God outside of us, or there's as if something is bestowed upon us from something external. She says, what is it? What is divinity for you? What is grace for you? Is it the mind? So this was her question. And it really haunted me in a very wonderful way and opened so many things up in my mind. First of all, divinity or grace, these are more Christian words, so we don't use these words very much in our tradition, but I like the fact that she was asking me with those words. And I think we do have a sense of what we might call the divine, though it's quite different. But I was thinking it's true. We don't, awakening or the divine or this sense of being completely at ease or resolved, or this deep feeling of faith that we might have all experienced is not something that is bestowed upon us. And yet you can't necessarily say it's the mind, because the mind really doesn't seem very divine sometimes. I think we struggle with our mind tremendously. We feel grief, and we feel sometimes the mind is not a very enjoyable. I mean, mind is a very vast term, but the activities of the mind, at least, don't feel divine to us. We struggle so much with our experience. So I thought about this more, and in our tradition, we wouldn't exactly say, not exactly, that the divine is the mind. What we might say is that divine, the experience of what is divine or awake or deeply resolved, or this sense of being amazed, has more to do with who we are in relation to our experience. So it's the relationship. It's not outside or inside, but more rather how sane our relationship is to our experience. And when I say experience, I don't just mean outer experience, such as, people or things or places, but the experience of our own mind. Actually, usually we think of thoughts and emotions and all of this phenomena as being inner. But actually, it feels like it comes at us as an object, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean when I say that? That I feel so depressed. Like depression is something that's happening to you. So in our tradition, we're looking very much at how we are able to, it has to do with our relationship to what we experience. When we struggle and we don't know what to do with what we call the natural vitality of the mind. It's as if we don't know how to digest our experience. We don't know what to do with it. We're confused about how to be in our world. And so this notion of relationship is very much what the Dharma is about. The Buddha himself said in the sutras, he said, when I attained enlightenment, the whole world became enlightened, which means enlightenment is not something you would arrive at or you get or that comes from inside of you and has nothing to do with your world. It has to do with who you are in relationship to everything. It has to do with interconnectedness. And that's the Dharma. If you want to look at the most central aspect of Dharma, the Buddha talked about interdependence. And the image that we find in the sutras are two bundles of reeds that are leaning up against each other. That there's not something happening separate from everything else, but everything is inextricably linked. And what we experience in each moment arises through infinite causes and conditions. We are an infinite relationship. So what I would say is divinity has something to do with that. And this week, someone sent me a wonderful video. It's called Overview. It's just a short, how people send you short videos on the internet. And it was a video about astronauts who have gone out into space, gone to the moon. And it was very surprising because what happened was these astronauts, and it happened even in 1968 when they went up for the first time on Apollo 8, they were going off into space and they thought their focus was on the moon. They thought their focus was going out into the universe in a way that they've never gone before. But what happened was, as they were leaving Earth and going out into space, they looked back at the Earth. And they were saying in this film that this was the most important experience of going out into space, was being able to see where they lived and having this incredibly large perspective or overview that changed the way they saw themselves. And they said that what happened was they moved out of this themselves into this place of being infinitely connected with everything. It's as if there was no separation. And they had the word awe, this intense experience of awe, they kept saying in the movie, awe, A-W-E-A, awe. They kept using that term, wonderment, awe, amazement, from this experience. And there was one man, he actually, when he came back, he was so riveted by that experience. He was so changed by that experience. So he started looking through all the scientific literature and religious literature for some sort of explanation for what he had experienced, this much bigger experience of being. And he wasn't finding anything. So he contacted his local university, and he had them start to research what this experience could have been. And they found this one term in this one Vedic text, actually, this one Sanskrit term, I think it's called Savikalpa Samadhi. It sounds very like Sanskrit, a certain kind of meditative absorption or meditative state. But I thought it was quite interesting because I think every tradition actually, not even tradition, we as human beings have these experiences, but he identified it in a particular tradition. And that was very helpful for him, at least to see that this is an experience that human beings have. This is something that we do experience by virtue of being a human being. So these experiences that we have are so important to recognize. So important to recognize. And I kind of started a collection of stories and poems and quotes of people talking about their experiences. And it's been quite fun for me. I have people working on it for me, so I get these emails from all over the place. And I get videos, and people tell me about their experiences or send me a poem. And I brought a few of them here tonight because I wanted to just start off with that. And they're wonderful because they come from different traditions. And one of them is from a movie, actually. One of my favorite poems is from a movie, the movie Beasts of the Southern Wild. Have you seen that? So I'm going to talk about that one first. So if you haven't seen the movie, it's a movie about a young girl who lives on the bayou in a very kind of unusual situation in a very poor area, kind of lives a very wild life alone with her father in a very small community of people. And she has all kinds of challenges, and of course there's tremendous joy as well. It's a very joyful movie in many ways. And she's lost her mother, and in the end of the movie, she also loses her father, and she has to confront some very ferocious imaginary beasts, and she does so with great courage, and she overcomes her fears. And at the end of the movie, the last line is so beautiful, and it spoke to me very directly and personally. So I want to read this to you. She says, "When it all goes quiet behind my eyes, I see everything that made me flying around in invisible pieces. When I look too hard, it goes away. But when all goes quiet, I see I am a little piece in a big, big universe, and that makes things right." And I collected another one I want to share, but I have a feeling many people probably know this one by heart. But I thought it was appropriate to read it out loud because it's by Thomas Merton. And we just drove by the corner where he had this epiphany. I think many of you know it was on Walnut and 4th, right? On the corner of Walnut and 4th Street. And he had this epiphany or this realization after a long period of monastic isolation, which makes it even more interesting because he had this epiphany in a crowd of people standing on a street corner. So he says, in Louisville, at the corner of 4th and Walnut, in the center of the shopping district, I was suddenly overwhelmed with the realization that I loved all those people and that they were mine and I was theirs, that we could not be alien to one another even though we were total strangers. It was like waking from a dream of separateness, of spurious self-isolation in a special world, the world of renunciation and supposed holiness. This sense of liberation from an illusory difference was such a relief and such a joy to me that I almost laughed out loud. I have the immense joy of being man, a member of a race in which God himself became incarnate. As if the sorrows and stupidities of the human condition could overwhelm me, now I realize that what we all are, and if only everybody could realize this, but it cannot be explained. There is no way of telling people that they are all walking around shining like the sun. And then from Rumi, I have one. He says, out beyond ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. When the soul lies down in that grass, the world is too full to talk about. Ideas, language, even the phrase each other doesn't make any sense. Just a couple more short ones. They're so brilliant. So I find these so inspiring. This is one by Walt Whitman. He says, do I contradict myself? Very well then. I contradict myself. I am large. I contain multitudes. And he says, in another poem, just a little snippet, I am the mate and companion of people, all just as immortal and fathomless as myself. And in the Buddhist tradition, particularly the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we have an expression of when somebody has a realization or they have this bigger experience, they talk about it as it's inexpressible, like a mute that's overcome by the profound sweetness of sugar. I start to see similarities in these. I don't know if you're finding that. There's another expression in the Tibetan tradition, emaho. It means how amazing it is, how amazing. So I find when I read these, I hear words like fathomless. I hear awe and humility, and I hear interconnectedness, which makes me quite confident that this is not so far away, that this has something to do with how we're in relationship with our world, that we can't reach definitive conclusions about things, that who we are and who others are, and what this incredible experience, this big experience is, it can't be described, or we can't shut down around it conceptually. But the fact that people try really beautifies the world. And here, perhaps we've all gathered together because we have a sense that perhaps if we haven't had even a glimpse of something like this, we're struggling, and we feel intuitively that there's something much bigger than this small world that we often live in. And I feel it's very important to take note of these experiences. And I was thinking, I recommend everybody really notice and look back on their life and really recognize or acknowledge these experiences. It's like, even by default, you're bound to have one of these time and again, because it's part of who we are as human beings. It's it's really, we might even say, the most ordinary part of who we are. It's when we're not so complex and struggling, and we're able to be natural, that we have these experiences. And I was thinking for myself, back when I was quite young, and I remember having experiences like these. When I read these, they seem almost familiar to me. And I remember talking to my mother and trying to describe these bigger experiences to my mom, and I didn't have much vocabulary. When I was 8 or 9 years old, I didn't know how to express it. But I remember once telling her that I felt very tall. That was my way of explaining it. And my mom was so wonderful, and continues to be wonderful, but she was so supportive of these, and she was always questioning me and making me feel more and more curious, supporting my curiosity about these experiences. And I feel so much like I want to do that too, and I'm so interested in people's experiences and my own experience of this. And yet, it's important to note, because we could get very tripped out on having these experiences, that in fact we're not special in these experiences. Again, we have these by virtue of being a human being. And by the same token, we're not very special in our confusion either. I think a lot of the times people get very caught. There's a tendency, or we can get caught in thinking that we're suffering so much, and it's my suffering rather than there is suffering. We cling to we focus on my suffering, but in fact, being a human being also means that we struggle, and we suffer, and we feel despondent, and we could feel depressed, and we want and we don't want, and all of this kind of juicy experience that we have. But it's not so special, and we're not so special, and we're just this, what did she say, this very small piece in a big, big universe. And it's just when we remember that things feel quite right. This has a lot to do with her. This has a lot to do with the mantra or the Heart Sutra, although if you are to read the Heart Sutra, you might not see this at all. And I think that's the kind of sometimes I feel frustrated as a Buddhist, because I have so much enthusiasm for the Dharma and for the scriptures, and yet I think, I've been studying this for 30 years very intensively, and then I go out and want to discuss Dharma with people, and you have to find skillful ways into it. So I promise you that it means that, but I can't explain right now why it does. But I think we can meet on the level of understanding these bigger experiences that we have. So, I thought of this word again, divinity and grace. The word grace is a nice one. I actually went to Harvard Divinity School this year, and I taught about faith. I just an evening talk on faith, which was really lovely, and we had a lot of discussion about faith. And somebody was asking about grace, and most people had the sense that grace was something bestowed upon them. And then we started to talk about interdependence and what it means to be in this kind of sane relationship with experience. And I've thought about this word grace and graceful recently a little bit. We say someone is graceful, for example, like a dancer, when they understand how the different parts of their body are interconnected, and they have a sense of the space around them and the ground beneath them, and as they say, the heavens above them, and they can move through that with such confidence. So there's a sense of if you had a strong, tight sense of me, and you didn't feel connected to the space around you, well, that's when we become clumsy and awkward, and we can't move in a graceful manner. Or this is another example, perhaps. I work a lot with horses, and horses are big, and they can be very intimidating, powerful creatures. And I'm learning more and more as time goes on how to move as they do in the herd, because it's very awkward to be around a horse. We're vertical, and they're horizontal on all fours. And how do you find that relationship with them? They're seeing things through such a different perspective. So it's all about relationship and movement, how we find a sense of kind of connectedness to the horse, which is very powerful. People who ride horses or work with horses, they're always looking for that place of being connected to the animal. You're not one, but you're not separate either. And how do you work with that? That speaks of relationship. Relationship means not one thing, but not two things either. Relationship, interconnectedness. So that's another example. Or like when we talk about social graces, if somebody is very self-focused and not paying attention to their guests, then we wouldn't say that they had good social graces. That when you're paying attention to others and concerned for their well-being, when you're not kind of collapsed into your own world, then you are able to respond appropriately, respond in a way that's beneficial for yourself and others. So this is, the meaning of grace. And when I think about that this has very much for me to do with meditation, because tomorrow we'll do some more meditation practice, but you might find what I've found in meditation, sometimes when I sit, there's so many thoughts and emotions, and the activity of the mind is quite intense sometimes, just burgeoning up, in one's experience. And what do you do with it? That's the big question for the practitioner. This is a big reason to meditate, is that we actually don't feel so at ease with our mind. It's hard to rest at ease. It's hard to be at ease with our experience. So meditation is a way of learning, actually, to enjoy the mind. I always say, if you look at your life, it's really just it's a continuum of momentary experiences. That's all life really is. Every moment, something else is arising. And yet, if we don't know how to enjoy that, and we start to reject experience, we start to have aggression, actually, toward our experience, and we have all our preferences and our wants and the things that we don't want, then we're actually kind of rejecting our life. We're not really enjoying our life in the deepest sense. And this is what meditation is for, I think. And Rinpoche and I spoke about this a little bit this morning, that in many ways, really, meditation is about enjoying your life and enjoying your experience and enjoying the richness of your world and the infinite relationship that you are a part of. It's a little bit like when you do look up at the stars at night. I live in a very beautiful, vast valley, and up at almost 9,000 feet. And when the moon is not out, you can see the entire universe. It feels like everything is very bright, and you can see the Milky Way and all the stars so clearly. And in some ways, it gives you a lot of perspective on your own insignificance. But at the same time, you might realize that you're actually part of that bigness. And that's the experience, I think, that we're talking about here. And I guess I just brought this all up because the word interfaith comes up a lot. Well, this is an interfaith group that's sponsoring this program. And then, my experience of Louisville was this interfaith conference. And then today we had a little lunch, and many people were there. And I must have heard that word 10, 20 times. And what does that mean? And, how do you introduce also a new tradition in all its uniqueness and beauty and what it has to offer into the mix, and also very much appreciate what everyone else is doing. Kathleen was asking me, we were talking about that a little bit today, this afternoon. That's of the utmost importance. And I think when we come down to these essentials, this experience, really the experience of confusion and the experience of openness and wisdom, these two things really connects us all. And we can appreciate all the different qualities and uniqueness of each tradition. I think Rinpoche and I share this understanding, and feel so happy to be here to share what we can of this weekend. Rinpoche said this morning something that was really made me feel so joyful. He said, it might be a public talk, or it might be that there's many new people here, but let's teach the true Dharma. Let's not hold back. And I love the spirit of that. Not that I think that Rinpoche ever does hold back, and he's always very appropriate to who he's speaking with. And I feel that myself too, but I do feel a deep appreciation for what's happening here, and a deep longing to want to give what I can to everyone here. So I will try to do that, my best with that. Would you like to say something, or if you don't want, I can do discussion, whatever you want. Continue, okay? Should I? Okay. I feel finished, but I could do some discussion if you want to wait. Whatever you want, Rinpoche, that would be fine. Is that what you would like better? Yeah, maybe you should go. Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. This is my first trip to Louisville. I'm already enjoying every moment in this city. I learned that the city has such a historical ties with Thomas Merton, who is a great thinker, brilliant mind, who was also ahead of his time. Many years ago, I was invited by a Catholic monastery in Big Sur in Northern California. They embraced me as one of them, their brother. They invited me to have a dialogue on Buddhism, meditation, truth, and there's a moment that I forgot that I was a Buddhist. And also I forgot that they are Christians. All the conventional identities fell apart, and they invited me to their commune. I stayed in that monastery one night. One of the young monks gave me his one copy of a Holy Bible, which is an expression of friendship and the trust. I remember going through their libraries and come across books by Thomas Merton. They are definitely admirers and the followers of Thomas Merton. I had a chance to read some of his works. They are truly inspiring. It's very difficult to categorize Thomas Merton. He's nobody, at the same time he's everybody. To me, he's a Christian as well as he's a Buddhist. Of course, he's the citizen of this earth. There's no doubt that Thomas Merton had a great interest and attraction to the Buddhism. I'm not indicating that Buddhism is better than Christianity. We must bear in our mind that all those great traditions have a profound message. They all teach the fundamental human ethics such as compassion, generosity. At the same time, each of those traditions have their own beauty, uniqueness. So Thomas Merton has perhaps found the uniqueness of a Buddhist tradition is very inspiring. The Buddhism has developed a very sophisticated both rational as well as a mystical knowledge on the path of meditation, reflection. And also Buddhism has been exploring the human consciousness last more than 2,000 years. Someone wrote that Buddha can be the first psychologist. Of course, you don't have to accept that statement. It is true that Buddhism has such a rich and a complete understanding of the human consciousness. When I say consciousness, I do not mean consciousness as some kind of abstract or supreme entity. Here, consciousness refers to the mind, including feelings, thoughts, emotions, as well as our habitual tendencies. And there are different levels of understanding of this human consciousness. Basically, Buddhism teaches that understanding the human consciousness or mind is very crucial in order to alleviate suffering and to bring about freedom, joy, and unconditional happiness. There's an expression we often use in Buddhism, which is the secret of consciousness. In Tibetan, Semgi Sawa, Sem means mind, consciousness, Sawa means secret. Tibetan master Lama Mapam said that the secret of consciousness is a very simple. We don't understand it because it is too simple. It is too close to us. Buddhist practice is about turning your attention inward and to understand all different dimensions of your mind and see how your mind works. And also finding answers that you're looking for. And tonight, each of you come here with different questions and also desires. Some of you might want to find out what the absolute is, what the God is. Some of you wanted to find maybe a specific answer or maybe advice how to overcome your depression. Or perhaps some of you are looking for an answer on meaning of life. Or some of you come here to understand more the Buddhist tradition. And all these questions, all these longings can be fulfilled simply by turning your attention inward and to understand the secret of your mind, the secret of your consciousness. In that sense, meditation is a profound exploration of human mind. And next 2 days, I myself and this wonderful teacher, Elizabeth, are going to spend time to lead all of you to meditate and also to present timeless Buddhist teachings. And we'll try to provide all of you both intellectual understanding of Buddhism and maybe even a direct taste of the Buddhist teachings such as awareness, love, and compassion. There is a verse that we always recite in Buddhism. Everybody recite this verse. Doesn't matter who they are. They could be a Thai Buddhist or Buddhist from Burma or Tibetan Buddhist. The verse has one particular line which says, "I shall tame my mind." As a Buddhist, we get up every early morning by reminding oneself that the path is to tame one's mind. To tame one's mind sounds very simple, but it can be lifetimes of work. Basically, it's all about turning your attention inside. When you turn your attention inside, you will realize that most of your struggles in your life, your misery, your depression, your anger, your guilt, I will say 95% of your problems are creation of your own mind. I'm sure that there are some objective problems, like having a flat tire on the highway. And that's not your mind creation. That's the real problem. You just can't sit there in the lotus posture and say, "This is my mind, and nothing's happening." You may have to call the AAA. You can't just sit there reciting Heart Sutra and tell yourself, "This is all illusion, it's all happening in my mind," because Buddhism says so. I'm sure there are concrete problems. If your child is crying, she must be hungry. You cannot sit, "This is just illusion. This is happening in my mind." You have to get up and find out what she needs. She may be hungry, and she may be thirsty, or you may have to change your diaper. So there are, of course, earthly problems that are purely objective. We cannot say everything is mind. But at the same time, it is true that by great surprise, we will discover that the 95% of our problems, our sufferings, are purely mind creation. And this is something we see in Buddhist path. We shock ourselves. We surprise ourselves by discovering this simple truth that 95% of our misery is our own invention, the creation of the mind. A mind is very powerful. I remember hearing a story about a Tibetan monk who was locked up in Chinese concentration camp for a long time. And he had one fear. His fear is not so much about being abused by the prison guards or being tormented or not having comfortable bed or nourished food, but his fear is that he may lose his tolerance, his love, his compassion to those who are torturing him. And this shows how powerful the mind is. So when you truly understand, I'm using the old Buddhist expression, the secret of a mind, a secret of consciousness, and then you may have the ability to overcome many of your personal sorrow. You will be able to forgive those who hurt you. You'll be able to expand the realm of your consciousness, whatever that might be. You're able to also open your heart. Your heart will keep getting bigger and bigger so you can hold more people. And also you'll find more joy at the core of your existence. As I stated earlier, that Buddhism is not particularly rational science, but maybe mystic science on the human mind, human consciousness. In that sense, Buddhism is human mind. Human mind is Buddhism. Both human mind and Buddhism are like a great sea. It's like bottomless sea. You can explore the surface of the sea, or you can just put your 2 feet into the surface of the sea and just stay there, or you can dive a little bit further into that great sea. Of course, you can stay on the surface of the Buddhism. You can learn all these wonderful Buddhist meditation techniques. You can use all these Buddhist meditative techniques for stress reduction. Nothing wrong with that, but that is not the depth of Buddhism. That is only the surface of Buddhism. We must remember that Buddhism is a great sea. You can keep diving in that sea forever, rest of your life. I feel that I haven't discovered the depth of Buddhism. I feel that I'm still in the process of diving into the sea of Buddhism, which is a very rich and a rewarding experience. I think in the end, when we really look into our mind, we may touch a ground. And that is maybe beyond the words and concepts. Today during lunch, one of you approached me, asked me, who's looking at everything? Who's observing everything? She said that maybe the God. So what I'm trying to say is that if you really turn your attention inward and dive into the sea of your own consciousness, you may find this non-conceptual ground. You can call it many names. You can call it Anatman, no self. You can call it great emptiness. In Tibetan Buddhism, that truth is so inexpressible, so difficult to describe through the logical mind. So we use many symbols to describe that undescribable. Perhaps many of you are familiar with the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, which is a very unique and rich among many Buddhist traditions. We use many archetypes, symbols, such as Avalokiteshvara and Tara. Avalokiteshvara is the Buddha of infinite compassion. But the Avalokiteshvara does not lie outside of yourself. Avalokiteshvara lies within. Avalokiteshvara is an expression of that indescribable truth within each of us. In the same Elizabeth showed all of you the image of the Yimchemo, the Paranjana Paramita, which is also expression of emptiness. So we use many symbols to describe that indescribable truth lies in all of us. And of course, you can employ your own terminologies and to describe it. It is true that in Buddhism, we negate the creator. Buddhism is non-theistic religion. And at the same time, we also have to remember that many of the debate that we have between traditions are purely semantical. We are arguing about words, but maybe there's a way that we can all come to the same conclusion and realizing that we are looking for the same truth, whatever word you use. So I'm going to shorten my speech. Very happy to be here. Also, I'm going to let all of you go back. And perhaps you had a very long day. And you're very courageous to give up a movie tonight. And the party as well as a dinner. And perhaps I'm sure there is your favorite season show happening tonight. And you give all of them and to come here to hear what we have to say. And thank you so much for coming here tonight. And then if you are free, we'll come back together next 2 days and we keep exploring the truth of Buddhism as well as our own consciousness. And that should be quite interesting as well as also transformative. I also would like to take this moment to express my personal gratitude to Elizabeth for coming here and to co-teach. She's such an amazing teacher Bodhisattva, and also Asli, wonderful catalyst in bringing all of us together. By the way, English is my second language. I'm sure I don't have to go through lengthy explanation of it. Perhaps you all have already quite a clear clue that my English is second language, and also I'm not a product of this culture, but at the same time I'm very happy to live in this country and to share the Buddhist wisdom with all of you. Recently we had a forum in Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, with some of the well-seasoned Buddhist meditators, few professors from UC Berkeley, as well as a few Tibetan lamas. The topic was the challenges that we meet in teaching Buddhism in the West. I told everybody that, and there are many challenges that I have been facing in teaching Buddhism, but I told everybody that I do not regard those challenges as an obstacle, but more rewarding. It forced me to love the Dharma, the path of Buddha, and also somehow or another motivate me to live the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma. And so I feel it's truly rewarding. And also I was talking about my joy of being part of this event with Asli, and I told him that this Tibetan Buddhist idea, when the motivation is pure, and then everything will go very well. We all have a good motivation. My motivation is not so much about coming here to convert you into Buddhist. That's not my motivation. And my motivation, and I'm sure Asli's and Elizabeth's, is that we want to share the Buddhist wisdom. Either you may identify yourself as a Christian, or Buddhist, or seeker. Our motivation to share this rich Buddhist wisdom, and then you can do anything with that. You can use it to find out more clarity, meaning in your life, or you can use it to enrich your own faith in your tradition. That might be Christianity or Hinduism. So thank you everybody for coming here. And thank you.
Thank you.